Ladies and gents, it is that time of year once again. Time for me to react to my Premier League predictions all the way from the beginning of the season. Buckle in, because some of these are horrendous. But before we do that, please consider dropping a like on this video and subscribing to the channel whilst you're down there. It would be greatly appreciated, and I would love to hit 2,000 subscribers before the end of this year, maybe even before the beginning of the next Premier League season. So drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and ladies and gents, let's get into this. We're going to be starting off in 20th position, and personally for me, that's going to be Bournemouth. Not a good start. It's not a good start, is it? It's pretty poor. To be fair, I think everyone in their nan had Bournemouth finishing bottom of the Premier League table. They had by far and away the worst squad coming up to the Premier League this season. Probably had the worst manager in Scotty Parker, and eventually sacked him, bringing in Gary O'Neill as assistant to take over the helm for the rest of the season. And to be fair to the lad, he did a great job. He kept Bournemouth in the division. They finished very strongly at the end of their campaign and eventually finished very much clear of the bottom three. Credit to Bournemouth, but I think they'll probably be going back down next season. In 19th position, we have Everton. I think it's the season where the Toffees get relegated. It's not good, is it? It's not looking good, bruv, is it? It's not looking good. I can't lie. I think, again, most people thought Everton were going to get relegated this season, especially with Frank Lampard at the helm, who seems to be incapable of coaching a winning team at the moment. But credit where credit's due, they sacked him at a decent point of the season, brought in Sean Dyche, and on the final day of the season, Abdoulaye Doucouré, screamer against Bournemouth, kept them in the Premier League. Again, much like Bournemouth, I think they'll be in trouble next season, especially if the club doesn't end up getting sold. But c'est la vie, they're staying in the division, and fair play. The Toffees, proper Premier League club. I'm happy they're staying up. Wrapping up the relegation zone, I've gone for Fulham. I feel like this one's pretty expected. I think most people are banging on these three teams.
You just like to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
To avoid relegation in 17th place, I have gone for Brentford. So yeah, in the end, Brentford finished 9th. I had them going as 17th. They actually did the double over Manchester City this season, the only team to do so, despite the fact that they lost Ivan Toney a few weeks before the end of the season. I've got to say, in terms of predictions this season, this is probably one of the worst ones that I've made alongside Fulham going down this season. In 16th, I've gone for Leeds United, and I do think they'll have a pretty decent season. I think they'll pick up some decent results, and I do think they deserve a bit of credit for how they've managed to replace Rafinha and Calvin Phillips in the summer window. And it's an absolute shambles yet again. Leeds to finish 16th in the Premier League. Again, an absolute whiffer of a prediction. They finished 19th in the end, being relegated on the final day thanks to that pretty hefty defeat at the hands of Tottenham at Ellen Road. In fairness, I think a lot of people thought they would struggle coming off the back of losing Calvin Phillips and Rafinha last summer, arguably, not even arguably, their two best players in that team. I thought they'd done quite well replacing them. I thought they'd made some really good signings. I thought Gnonto, Sinistera, I thought they'd all kick on and do a good job. Tyler Adams had a good season before getting injured. Overall, not a great season for Leeds. They've been relegated. Again, probably they'll come back up in the next couple of years, but again, a pretty whiffing prediction on my part. Next up, we have 15th. Here we go. Nottingham Forest. There we are. 15th. There we are, lads. There we are. Pretty interchangeable. I said there, 14th, 15th, 16th, very interchangeable in terms of the Premier League, and that ended up being the case. West Ham, Bournemouth, and Nottingham Forest finishing within a couple of points of each other. Obviously, 16th is where we finished in the end. I said 15th. But definitely the closest prediction I would say so far, and I'm chalking that up as a win in my books. A great season returning to the Premier League. It definitely looked tough at stages. It definitely looked like Marinakis might actually sack Cooper for large spells of the season, but credit to him, he stuck by him. Cooper's kept us up in the division, and I think developed some really good talent. I think Awoniyi looks fantastic. Morgan Gibbs-White and Brennan Johnson were our two players of the season, and I've got to say, I think with some good business in the summer, cutting some of the fat from the squad, we can survive again next season and maybe even push on more towards mid-table. 14th, I have gone for Southampton. That was a bad one. Southampton to finish 14th in the Premier League table. It's not looking good, bro. It's not looking good. Southampton obviously finishing 20th in the end. And to be fair, I didn't leave that in there, but my main argument for it was I thought that Hasenhuttl was a top quality coach, and I generally thought that the business that they'd done was pretty good. I was a fan of Bella Kotchap. I was a fan of Romeo Lavia, and I think they did have pretty decent seasons individually. As a team, however, they really struggled to get themselves over the line. And I think sacking Hassan Hutel, although I think he probably took the team as far as he could at the point in the season they sacked him, bringing in Nathan Jones seemed to be one disaster leading to another. And I think in the end that Ruben Sellers had no real option. He had no real chance of keeping them up in the Premier League. I think they'll probably come back fairly soon. I think in terms of squads going down to the Championship, I think they're the best place in terms of the youth in their team. A lot of players on pretty low value contracts, and I think they'll see themselves return to the Premier League fairly soon. And I do like Southampton. They are a decent club. They are vintage Barclays, if you will, and hopefully they come back fairly soon. Brighton and Hove Albion, I do think they're going to take a slight step back this season, losing their two best players, or at least at the time of recording, looking quite likely that Cucurella is going to go join Manchester City. Didn't go to Manchester City, went to Chelsea. Joining Tottenham. Yeah, so how about them Seagulls then? How about them Brighton? Was that one of my worst predictions this season? I feel like I keep saying that on every single one because I've absolutely whiffed these predictions this season. We move towards the top end of the middle half. Here we go. Who's finished mid-table? In 12th position. Okay, so I'm going to put that down as a bit of a dub for me, actually. I had Wolves finishing 12th. They ended up finishing 13th. That's a pretty good prediction on my part, especially considering some of the ones I've made in this video already. Obviously struggled at the beginning of the season. They brought in Julian Lopetegui, very experienced head coach, former Real Madrid and Porto manager, and it already looks like he could be leaving after steering them to a mid-table finish due to the financial issues at Wolves this season. Turns out that 50, 60, 70 million, whatever they got for Morgan Gibbs-White in the end, hasn't stretched them very far. Who would have known? Aston Villa, another solid season for Steven Gerrard's men, maintaining their Premier League status, but not really going too much higher than that. Not good, not good. To re-establish themselves back in the Premier League. Yeah, I'm going to put that one down as an L. I had Villa finishing 11th. They ended up finishing 7th in a Europa Conference League place. Fantastic season, definitely in the second half for them upon sacking Steven Gerrard, who started pretty poorly. They were in the relegation zone, I believe, at points with us for large parts of the beginning of the season. In the end, former Sevilla and Villarreal manager Unai Emery comes in, steers the ship, and actually puts them on a really good run. They just sort of crept up the table. I think many people didn't realise that they were going on the run that they did, finish 7th in the end thanks to that win on the final day against Brighton, which qualified them for European football. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how Emery balances this team going into next season. It's a fairly deep squad, but I think they need to add some quality and depth additions in particular areas of the pitch to give them the opportunity to compete potentially on 2 or 3 different fronts next season. But a great season for Villa all round. In 10th, I've gone for Newcastle. I think it will be a top half finish for the Toon. So yeah, I had Newcastle finishing 10th. They ended up finishing 4th. Not a great prediction on my part, but then water is wet. Most of my predictions have been pretty poor so far throughout this video. Obviously, I think most people had them finishing fairly high at the table. I don't think many people had them finishing in the Champions League places. In fairness, I think they have overperformed based on the talent that they have. I think the acquisitions in the last 18 months are the likes of Alexander Isak, obviously bringing in Bruno Guimaraes, who seems to be the star player in that team, although I think the defence also has taken a huge step forward. Trippier, Botman, Burn have all done very well in defence. Nick Pope for pennies on the dollar from Burnley as well was a really great signing. Overall, it's a really good season for Newcastle, and I'm really excited to see where they push on to next season. In 9th, I have gone for Crystal Palace. Ooh, 9th for Crystal Palace. That's definitely a rogue one. I don't know what I was thinking when I saw that. I mean, they have got some really good players in that team, to be fair. They did make some pretty good signings as well, and overall, they have the core of a really good team. Eze and Elise came really good towards the end of the season. It took the sacking, obviously, of Patrick Vieira and the reintroduction of Roy Hodgson as head coach for them to finish pretty comfortably in the end of the Premier League, 11th place overall come the end of the season. And in fairness, a pretty solid season. I think 9th to 11th is pretty decent in terms of predictions. But I don't know what I had them finishing towards the European places for. I thought they'd be decent, but I didn't think they'd be that good. Jesus. In 8th, I've gone for Leicester, and this is definitely the least confident one. I personally think Brendan Rodgers has taken this team as far as
Okay, that's
can.
true.
And
That's
I do
true.
think it's time that Leicester consider moving into a new project.
I think that's
and
fair.
finding another manager to take them to. That
To be
next
fair,
stage,
everything
which I
I've said
would
so far is
imagine.
pretty fair.
So you-
Obviously, I've got the prediction on the position wrong. Leicester obviously got relegated in the end. The context I was giving to the situation in terms of it probably being the end of the road for the project for Brendan Rodgers at Leicester City, I think was a pretty fair assumption to make. Obviously sacked towards the end of the season with the club in the relegation zone, brought in Dean Smith to sort of steady the ship and try and keep them out of the Championship next season. That didn't happen. They ended up getting relegated, which is insane to think considering they won the Premier League like 7 years ago and won the FA Cup like even more recently.
In 7th, I think it's going to be the Irons, West Ham. I think they're going to be taking that Europa Conference League place for this upcoming season. And I wouldn't be surprised if Moyes takes them quite deep in that competition in this upcoming campaign.
That's
Maybe
fair.
even
That is
win
a
it. I feel
fair
like they're one of
point.
the favourites for the competition.
That is
this
pretty fair.
season.
Okay, so that's like a 50% correct prediction. I had West Ham finishing 7th. They ended up finishing 14th in the Premier League. But I did say that they would go quite deep or potentially even win the Europa Conference League. Now, at the time of recording, we don't know if they've won it or not. They haven't played in their final yet. But they did reach the final to face Fiorentina for a spot in the Europa League next season. And a very solid season, to be fair, despite the fact that they had a very poor league campaign. 14th is definitely not where you would expect this core of players, especially after finishing top half for 2 or 3 seasons in a row to finish. But I think a really good campaign in the Europa Conference League has given at least something for David Moyes to leave on. I do think he should leave in the summer regardless of the result in the Europa Conference League final. Again, I think much like Brendan Rodgers last season, I think he's taken this West Ham side as far as he can take it. And we've seen with teams like Leicester this season, if you don't adequately cut ties with the manager at the right point in the project, you can find yourself taking steps backwards rather than steps forwards.
Now it's time to determine where the big six
Here we go,
are
big
coming
six.
this
I had the big
season
six
in
finishing in the
Premier
top
League.
6
And
this
in sixth
season.
place, I've gone
And
for
sixth
Manchester United.
is Manchester United, right? Okay, so not a good prediction on that account. I had Man United finishing 6th in the Europa League places. They finished 3rd in the end, and a really good season for Manchester United. A positive season. I wouldn't say an excellent season, but really positive, taking steps forward. There are obviously issues at Manchester United in terms of building that team. I still think there's a lot of work to be done. Probably need a new goalkeeper. I think De Gea is past it in terms of his ability to do anything positive that a net positive possession-based team needs to be doing. I don't think he can do any of that stuff. He can't play out from the back. He can't claim crosses. He can't sweep off his line. Probably another centre-back, especially with Lindelof and Maguire looking like they could be on their way out. And I think a striker is still something that, you know, is still very important at Man United alongside a first phase midfielder. There's a lot of positions still needed at Man United, but I think it is a net positive season for United, and they've made some really good steps forward, and it'll be interesting to see what Ten Hag does with them next season.
In 5th, I've gone for Chelsea. I would argue at the top 6, they're probably the only team who've made...
All right. This is not good. I had Chelsea finishing 5th. Obviously, that is nowhere near where they finished. They finished 12th on their lowest points tally in their entire Premier League history, which is pretty shocking when you consider the amount of money that they have spent.
In 4th for the first
Here we go. Who we got in 4th?
Space, I'm going to go for the Gunners.
It's
Arsenal.
awful
I'm
again.
really impressed with the business
What
that's
am I
been done
doing?
by Mikel
4th
Arteta's side
for
this summer.
Arsenal.
Big fan of
4th
Zinchenko coming into office
is
as a left back
really,
and
really
midfield.
bad
Big
for Arsenal. Now, I think, again, if you look at them, I think most people would have had Arsenal finishing top 4, maybe 5th at the worst. But obviously, in the end, they finished 2nd. They were the closest team to Manchester City. They led the Premier League for like 200 odd days of the season for most of the campaign, and unfortunately just couldn't quite get it over the line. I do make the argument later in this point that they made some really good signings, specifically Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko. Obviously, they've turned out to be 2 of the better players for Arsenal this season, so I'll definitely take a W on that. I think Martinelli and Saka have had fantastic seasons. Ødegaard probably, outside of Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne, the best player in the Premier League this season. I think he's definitely that 3rd place player in terms of form this season. And I'm just really excited because this is such a young team that Arsenal have put together. You know, it's one of the youngest teams in the Premier League at the moment. It'd be really interesting to see 3 or 4 years' time, when they've got 3 or 4 years more experience, what they can do in terms of challenging for not just the Premier League, but maybe even European titles in years to come.
In 3rd position, I'm going to go for their North
Who have we got?
rivals, Tottenham Hotspur. I think this is going to probably be as
it's
far as
so
one
bad.
team can take this Tottenham.
It's so bad. Spurs to finish 3rd. They finished 8th in the end. Oh, it's honking. It is awful. This this is not looking good, bro. It is not looking good whatsoever. They need a new sporting director because Paratici's left. Conte's walked out, so they need a new manager. We are approaching 2021 territory in terms of how long it's been since the last manager left and the new manager has been appointed. They've gone through Nagelsmann and Luis Enrique, Arne Slot, now looking like Ange Postecoglou could be the option for manager. It's just an absolute nightmare at Tottenham at the moment. I am deeply sorry, Tottenham fans, that you're going through this. It is hilarious, but I'm deeply sorry that you're going through this.
In second, I've gone for Liverpool.
We've got Liverpool
will be the runners-up.
finishing second in the Premier League. Where do we begin? In fairness, they clawed it back at the end of the season. Jurgen Klopp deserves credit for that. He made some tweaks to the build-up shape and to the positioning of certain players in the team, specifically Trent Alexander-Arnold, pushing him into more central positions, specifically in build-up, and they ended up finishing fifth, and they clawed it back towards the end of the season. And they did take it down to the last couple of match weeks in terms of qualifying for the Champions League. So that means that we have Manchester City finishing first in the Premier League predictions. I believe the only team that we got actually correct in the position that they finished this season to where I predicted it. A couple of teams we were in maybe one or two positions, but the only bang on team we actually got, which is horrendous. I actually have a decent track record. If you go back on my channel, I have a decent track record at predicting the finishing places of Premier League teams. But this season clearly was one of the most unpredictable in years. I think it shows when you've got the likes of Leicester, West Ham, sort of down there in a relegation battle, Everton sort of perpetually crap. So, in fairness, I think it was a very tough season to predict. A word on City, obviously fantastic for them to have won another Premier League title, a third on the bounce. At the time of recording, they are still on for the treble. They haven't played in their FA Cup final yet, or the Champions League final. Next weekend, Haaland obviously is the star guy, 36 goals or whatever in the Premier League this season, broke the single season goal scoring record. De Bruyne with like 16 assists this season as well has been absolutely fantastic. Obviously, the big change, though, has been at the back. They've changed defensive structure. They play 4 centre-backs, essentially, across that back line, which turns into a 3-2 build-up shape with John Stones stepping in from the defensive line into the midfield line alongside Rodri. And it's just so much more solid. I think when you're playing natural fullbacks in there, they're not necessarily as big. They can't do the sort of defensive work that you maybe want them to do. When you're playing that flat back four, you've essentially got 4 centre-backs and a defensive midfielder who's one of the best in the world. And it's just so difficult to break that down because they're all very athletic and they're all very good defenders. So credit where credit's due, because in January it looked like it could be Arsenal who pipped them to the title, but I think that one change, that slight tweak to their build-up pattern has been what has edged them over the line and put them within 2 games of history and winning a treble. There we are, ladies and gents, then my reactions to my Premier League predictions. Probably some of the worst you are likely to see across the internet over the next couple of weeks. Let me know your thoughts on my predictions down in the comment section down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. Let me know some of your predictions from the beginning of the season that maybe ended up coming true or ended up not coming true in the end. And whilst you're down there, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel whilst you're down there, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. I'm really excited for the content I'm going to be bringing out in the next few weeks. I've got some Forest related videos and hopefully some more scout reports as we head into the summer transfer window to get out for your viewing pleasure. With that being said, though, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for sticking by the channel for yet another Premier League season, and I will catch you later.